what I call right asking. So there's a way to ask people who are well-known, famous, to support you and do a project with you where you'll get a no every time. But there's also a way to ask them where you'll get a yes. And that is to make it so easy to participate that they can say yes.
And Foster here. We're really excited today to have Keith Leon S. with us. He is a 9 times award-winning and 11-time international best-selling author, as well as a successful book publisher and filmmaker. So we're really excited to have him. He's appeared on many radio and television programs, including ABC, CBS, NBC, and The Jenny McCarthy Show. So we're really excited about that. He also has a compelling inspirational story about growing up with a manic-depressed mother and no father, and he barely graduated high school. So we're really excited to find out more about him, and he's even had encounters with angels. So, Keith, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into book publishing and filmmaking.
Wow. That's quite a story. My wife and I had aspirations to write a book, and we figured when we started our business, we would just go ahead and do a DBA as a publishing company because we knew we were going to probably write a lot of books. And so we did that. And when we first got together, we kind of, I'm going to use the words, told on ourselves about things that didn't work in previous relationships. And because we led with that and we came up with ways that we wanted to be in relationship, ways that we wanted to communicate, we unknowingly created a powerful communication tool that we started using. And we would use that in front of other people in times where other people would, I don't know, at least yell at each other, let alone some people throw things at each other. Like in those kind of moments, we would just stick to this way of communicating and work right through it in front of people. So many people were like, what is that thing you're doing? And finally, when the last person, kind of the last straw, asked that, the next time my wife and I got in a disagreement, she was like, do you mind if I get a piece of paper and write this down? And I was like, whatever, because we were in it.
Right.
So she gets a piece of paper and she starts writing down the way we're communicating. And ultimately, that's a tool that we call the format, and is why we actually got John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, When We Were From Venus, the #1 selling book of all time in relationships, to endorse our book about relationships. So that was the beginning. Continued to write books. And then the second book that I did, that was the one that put me on the map. I had 10 people from the movie The Secret in the book. They all took me under their wing and taught me everything they know. So I started teaching people how to write books. And then eventually I had helped enough people that one of my mentors, Jack Canfield, was very key. You're helping so many people to write these books. You might want to take them all the way through and help them publish as well. Well, that's where we made the shift into publishing. And I stopped counting at 100 books when we had published 100 books. So, who knows how many it is now. But we publish books that make a difference. And you feel better when you put it down than when you picked it up where it's not in our catalog. So that's how it all started, and a snapshot version of that story.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about the angel story. So what is it with the experience with angels? And this is a book that you have, right?
Yeah, I wrote a book called Walking with My Angels, A True Story. And that was me being brave and coming out of the angel closet, so to speak. I had my mother and father divorced when I was 2. And like you shared earlier in the bio, she was manic-depressive, more depressive than manic. Matter of fact, I looked forward to the manic because then we got to do adventures and have fun. But mostly, and it was depressed, barely get out of bed, depressed. So, and I had no father figure, and my grandmother and sister and like church members were trying to pitch in, but a lot of times I was left by myself and to myself. And so at one point I heard a voice, and the voice spoke to me and said, I am your guardian angel. We're real. I'm revealing myself because I'm here to assist you. And assist, he did. It did. Kept me out of harm's way many times, told me what to do, to kept me from being molested around the corner from my house. Don't go up that between those 2 buildings. didn't need to find out somebody got hurt later, there in that spot,
Mhm.
all of that. So I could hear my guardian angel's voice since I was a child, and that did so much for me. Well, if you flash forward into my early 20s, I was working as a bartender, and there was a man who showed up there who was very mysterious and very quiet, barely said anything, and then when he did, everybody was kind of listening, leaning in, very charismatic character. And so I was serving him every day, and I got to know him, and at one point, we decided to hang out after work, and he started asking me a lot of questions about my belief system, what I believed in. And at that time, I was really in kind of a deep, dark drug phase, I would call it, really not headed in a great direction. And so he continued to ask me questions, but he also continued to predict things that were going to happen. And they always happened exactly the way
Mhm.
that he shared. And
Mhm.
he probed, and eventually at one point he was like, "Do you trust me?" And I said, "Yes." So he took this ring that my stepfather had on when he died when I was very young, and
Mhm.
took that ring, and so only my stepfather and me had worn it, put it in his hands, and then he did continue to do a life review from the time I was born up until my stepfather died with that ring on in a very horrific way. And then he went, "Oh God, I could have went my whole life without seeing that," and gave me the ring back. So I I went from kind of believe at that point, not believing in anybody, especially like psychics, and I had a big story about
Yeah.
people, to this guy, like there's no Google back then. Just
Right.
or for
Yeah.
work. So there's no way, like, how could he know all of these things about me?
Right.
Continued to work with me. And then at one point he said, "Again, do you trust me?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You know how people call earthbound, like people that do good deeds, earthbound angels?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "That's people that do good deeds." He said, Earthbound angels are etheric angels that assume a body, come into a body, and then they are assigned to certain people to work with them, keep them from dying before their predetermined expiration date." Never had heard that term before.
Right. Predetermined.
Predetermined expiration. Well,
Everyone has an
well,
expiration date.
yeah,
Like,
that we know about and agree to. Yep. So then he said, "So I'm here to keep you from that happening because
yeah.
you're here to make a profound difference on the planet. And if you die, then that won't happen." And he said, in his words, "It will have a not so great effect on the planet." So I'm like, no pressure.
Yeah. I swear.
Thanks a lot. So the journey went on from there. It's all in the book about how he took me from kind of believing in nothing to believing in everything. And then out of body experience he facilitated where I met with beings, grand beings of light, all sorts. And they all told me my purpose and what I was here to do on
Mhm.
how I was going to make that difference. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's really cool. I almost don't even want to jump to the next story because I'm like, I want to hear more about this, but it sounds like we can get the book and find out, right? With Angels, a true story.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the film. So, the inside effects, how the body healed itself. So, how did you even come up with, I'm going to do a film now? Like, was this a book first, or you were just like, I need to do this movie?
When you read the book in the intro, it's like, I always had a plan. 20s and 30s,
Uh,
rock star. 40s, best-selling author, speaker. 50s, filmmaker, since I was a kid. So 20s and 30s, I played a lot of music. I was in bands. I've had the blessing of performing with the Stevie Wonder and Ben Vereen and Kev Moe,
mm,
Nancy Wilson, and just legends
yeah.
for not to, rock star status, but I feel like tick, fulfilled.
Yeah. Playing
Never
with them, not, I mean,
or
that
yeah,
rock star for sure.
it counts. 40, started writing books, right? International best-selling author. Second book I did put me on the map. Spoke on the large stages, media, television have done the deal. Became a publisher and helped other people. So it's like tick.
Mhm.
So now I was sitting there in my mid 50s, and I realized, wait a minute, 50s was always film, but this whole publishing thing has went so well that I kind of kept putting that on the back burner. So what
Uh-huh.
happened was that they decided to shut the whole world down halfway through my year-long angel tour, where I was doing live events, media, book signings. That's when they decided to shut the whole world down. So as you know, all events went away, gone.
Right.
Everybody's in their house doing nothing but
Yeah.
watching TV and getting scared to death. And so,
Mhm.
well, it's just like, wow, okay. So what am I to do? And then I was told about doing a book series, and I did that, started that process. And then time went on, and my wife was doing a lot of research
Mhm.
about all the things that were going on and said to be going on and what's real and what isn't was her like focus. What's real, what isn't? And she's a researcher. So she
Mhm.
started reaching out and connecting to these people who are cutting edge doctors, like
Mhm.
researchers, scientists, right? And well, some of them had a different story than what was being told on the news. And
Right.
and so and everybody was in the right and wrong camp, right? Everybody wanting to be right about their thing, and people were
Right.
butting heads and being nasty on Facebook and social
Mhm.
media. And I was just like, I don't want anything to do with that. So I just went into prayer and meditation. I was coaching people, trying to help them through the process, like just staying in my spiritual space. But my wife was like, the more she researched, she would come with like, did you, have you heard this? And then she would tell me things. And I was like, wow. And at one point she just said, Keith, I really feel like part of your purpose here is to bridge the gap, to bring the two sides that are trying to be right together. And
Mhm.
because you're the most neutral person that I've ever encountered walking the earth. And no matter what I share with you, stay in this even place. So I think you're the one. And I was like, I'm not the one. So I went back to what I was doing over here. I kept saying I'm not the one. But one time when I was in prayer and meditation and doing what I teach, which is sit, ask, and listen, which is sit and ask
Mhm.
one question,
Mhm.
keep asking the one question till you receive the answer. That changed my life. Instead of being like entrepreneur, like I always was, shiny object syndrome. Oh, I forgot I asked the question 2 minutes ago. I no wonder why I'm not getting any answers. So I
Yeah.
was in that sit, ask, and listen. And I clearly heard like, you're the one. And I was like, for the bridge the gap to all the right and
Mhm.
wrong people in the health field and all that. It was like, yes, you're the one. And I was like, so I came out,
Oh, great.
"Oh, Bernie, I'm the one. She's like, I told you. Well, so yeah. So I was like, well, then what would I make a film about? My inquiry. And I remember my aunt, when I was really young, got diagnosed with cancer, and they told her they had the guts to tell her she had 2 weeks to live.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
that bad all throughout her body.
Yeah.
And, and so she, being a woman of faith, said, yeah, I don't think so. I think I'm here to do things greater than 2 weeks. That's what you gave me, right? So I'll come back in 2 weeks. We'll retest and we'll see where we're at. They're like, okay, crazy lady, sent her on her way. She came back 2 weeks. They did all the tests, completely gone, nothing. They could find nothing in her body.
Mm.
A line of doctors all the way up the hallway looking at before and after. So, so she told me when I was young, she said, cancer is like it's an implanted thought. It's a man thing. Anything that can be created can be uncreated. And with God, all
Mhm.
things are possible. She told me. So I bought in, right? So I never had cancer or even considered it would ever be a thing
Mhm.
in my body. So I thought, wow, the inside effects, how the body heals itself. And that would give me a chance to probe and to ask questions to these scientists, researchers, doctors, all the people my wife had been researching, doctors who we published, functional medical practitioners, to really uh, get in there from a neutral place and to ask them all to deliver it from a neutral place. And that's the piece. There's some pretty like edgy things, maybe things you've never heard of or even considered in the film, but of all the people who have seen it, I only got like 10 nasty emails saying, how dare you? Because of the neutral place that everybody delivered the conflict from. So it's a beautiful piece of work, very vulnerable people being willing to put themselves out there to say some,
Yeah.
well, maybe people haven't heard before and might think they're crazy, but all just for consideration. It's like it's education, consideration. What do you think? That's basically at the end of what I say.
Right. Well, that's really cool, and I hear you have quite the cast. So you invited, or the cast is Mickey Willis, J.P. Sears, Amanda Vollmer, Tom Cohen, and then Dr. Andrew Kaufman, Dr. John, I get
DeMartini,
DeMartini, yeah,
DeMartini from The Secret.
DeMartini, yeah, from The Secret, Lynn McTaggart, Dr. Bradley Nelson, Kyle Pace, Karen
Cease.
Karen,
Mhm.
I think that's how you say it, Lisa Warner, and many more. But how did you get, like, that's a lot of really big people, like, some of them are comedians too, or well-known influencers. How did you get them to come on the show? Or
Yeah.
what even made you think, I besides doctors, I think we'll have comedians. Like, what made you think that?
Well, I knew that some of the subjects were gonna be really heavy, especially the new information. So I thought anytime that, and I feel energy and I really sense energy. So I was like, anytime that the energy's feeling heavy, I'm gonna bring in some comedy
Mhm,
relief to just pull us out of the moment so that we can, even the viewer can stay like
mhm,
this with us, right? And that's why I'm kind of a different director, is I'm just divinely inspired as to what to do instead of contriving step by step. Uh, yeah, and so as far as asking them, with the "Who Do You Think You Are" book that I quickly
mhm,
mentioned earlier, during that process, I was asking Source, God, right? What is my next step? Like all the way through that project. I put away my what I thought I should do and just said, what's my next step? And waited till I got the answer. So one of the things that I downloaded, is the word I would use through that process, was what I call right asking. So there's a way to ask people who are well known, famous, to support you and do a project with you where you'll get a no every time. But there's also a way to ask them where you'll get a yes. And that is to make it so easy to participate that they can
mhm,
say yes. And so that's something that I teach all of our
mhm.
authors. And so it's made it easy for them to say yes. And a lot of them, especially the kind of cutting edge folks, were like happy to have a platform of that magnitude to share this information with, and told me like, well, we got a lot of guts. You have any idea what's coming? And I was like, yeah, I don't like that story and I'm not taking it on. So you keep that story. My story is everything's just fine. And it was.
Yeah, that's really cool. I really like JP Sears. He was at the Tony Release of Power Within when I did it,
Yeah.
before they were online, so it was in person. So it was really cool, so I got to meet him. It was my celebrity moment of meeting a celebrity.
He's an incredible soul. And yeah, like you said, that's a impossible ask, I think, for anybody else. But Mickey's a good friend of mine, and he had just done his film, and actually it was Kyle Cease, who's was in movies and then stand up, and now he's doing kind of spiritual growth work with people. It was him at the end of his interview. He said, "Who do you not have that you want?" And I was like, "JP Sears," and he's like, "Oh, he's my best friend. Hang on a minute." And he just like, notes. We kept talking. A couple minutes later, he's like, "Oh, here's the contact information. Done." And he's like, "Well," I'm like, "That's when you know you're on
Yeah.
course, right?
Uh-huh.
You're doing the almost that easy, that simple. You go, "Mm, yeah, I'm supposed to be doing this project."
That's really cool. That's really cool. Well, where can people go to watch the film or to see the trailer or to get more information about the film?
Well, go to the Inside Effects, plural, right? theinsideeffects.com, and you just put in your name and email address. It'll send you the link to be able to watch the film. The film has won 7 awards, was shown at 2 festivals, and that's like 92 minutes. And so I once in a while I send an email out, so you will be on the email list. If you don't want to be on that, the first email you get from me, just hit unsubscribe. No worries. But I just want you to know that is part of it. Name and email address, but it's free on that.
Okay, great. Well, people can go and get that at insideeffects.com. We'll put that up in the show notes too. And then there's a book as well. And tell us a little bit more about your publishing company before we wrap up here. What makes you different than other publishers?
That's a great question. All right. Well, it's Leon Smith Publishing. We have multiple imprints so that we have an imprint so it shows up a couple other ones at the top.
Mhm.
Uh, and what ma- first we publish books that make a difference. So you feel more when you put it down than when we picked it up. So if you read a murder novel, or if it's like politics or something like that, it's not a match uh, for what we publish. And when I connected with your team and we were kind of
Yeah,
comparing
compared
what
to
we
our
do,
published
all
company.
right, well, great. Where was a beautiful amount of crossover. And the difference was you are having a podcast, and that's something I used to do, but don't do anymore. And then the difference that we had that you didn't offer was we have a process where someone can speak a book in 7 phone calls. So you need a book, but you're in service like chiropractors, right? And functional medic, and they're just in service to
Yeah, like you're
everyone.
too busy to write it.
When on earth am I going to write this book? It's not happening. So it's great. But can you do 7 phone calls? Carve that out. And we just lead the process. People speak the book, and then we take the spoken word, turn it into a book for them. And so that's the thing that really sets us apart. And there's
Yeah. So you have
well, yeah,
editors and ghostwriters that
you
help
know,
with the
we're,
that
yeah,
would
we're
make
a
it all
full
be
service publishing company. We have anything any author would ever need. We offer that service, but that's the one thing that sets us apart. And even, other people over the years have been like, "Ooh, that's a great idea." And I've heard people say, "Oh, I know someone that's doing what you're doing." And I say, "Do you though?" Because there's a very specific way that we do it. And at the beginning, there's a process that we do that really puts people in the perfect space to deliver the content, puts them in their power. Like, I really know this. I'm the expert in this. And so whatever comes through in this moment is perfect. And then we're going to stick with that.
right. Well, and it's also about the interview questions, like in those 7 phone calls, how you go about extracting their information, it makes a big difference because
Yes.
anybody can talk a book, but if you don't know what to say, it's not gonna be a good book. So
At my wonderful first phone call, we know exactly what's going to be in that book. And then the other
it's
calls are just reminding and prompting
yeah,
after doing that process that
right.
puts them in the,
I
yeah.
like that, that's great. Well, where can people go to get, more information on the publishing?
LeonSmithPublishing.com.
Okay, perfect. We'll put that in the show notes as well, and people can go and,
Thank you.
thank you so much for being on our show.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been the Elite Publishing Podcast. Please subscribe and please share this podcast episode with those who you think will benefit from it. Of course, leave us a review if you can. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks. This is Jenn Foster signing out.
Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.